I think it is important to explain what Broadcast Zero is. Perhaps more importantly, what it isn't. If you've arrived here looking for conventional hypnosis, rapid inductions, constant guidance, a voice that reassures you every few moments, and everything is happening exactly as it should, these recordings may feel surprisingly empty. And that isn't because they failed. They're simply asking different questions. Broadcast Zero asks for an unusual kind of patience. It doesn't rush towards a particular outcome. It doesn't continually reassure you that you are doing it correctly. It asks something simpler. Remain. Observe. Notice. For some people, that will feel deeply compelling. For others, it may feel frustrating. Both responses are perfectly understandable. I've spent many years creating erotic hypnosis. I still love erotic hypnosis. I don't believe pleasure needs to justify itself. I don't believe every experience needs to become philosophical. But over time, I noticed something changing in me. I wasn't becoming less interested in hypnosis. I was becoming increasingly interested in the experiences surrounding it. Waiting, anticipation, and a curious relief that sometimes arrives when another person's attention becomes more compelling than the constant narration of your own thoughts. And those moments fascinated me, not because they were extraordinary, because they seemed to disappear in the moment we hurried past them. I began wondering what would happen if we simply didn't. Broadcast Zero grew from that question, not because I wanted to reinvent hypnosis, or eroticism, or submission. I simply wanted to remain with them long enough to discover whether there was something else quietly waiting there. I've started thinking about BDSM differently over the years, not less physically, if anything, more physically. The body remains important, the sensations remain important, the desire remains important. But I began wondering whether BDSM makes certain human experiences unusually visible. Attention, trust, anticipation, voluntary surrender. The feeling of allowing another person's intention to matter. Once I started looking for those experiences, I realised they weren't confined to BDSM at all. They appeared in conversations, in music, in works of art, in meditation, in grief, in love. BDSM hadn't invented those experiences. It had simply revealed them with unusual clarity. That's what I mean when I talk about metaphysical BDSM. Not something mystical, not something supernatural. Simply the recognition that these experiences reach further than we sometimes imagine. Broadcast Zero explores those experiences through sound, not to replace erotic hypnosis, not to criticize it, but to look at the same territory through another lens. One thing has become increasingly clear to me. We spend a remarkable amount of our lives moving from one experience to the next, not because we're impatient, because that's what the modern world rewards. We recognize, we categorize, we conclude, then we leave. I've started wondering how many experiences quietly continue after we've already decided they're finished. Not because something hidden suddenly appears, but because duration changes our relationship with what is already there. Broadcast Zero isn't slower because I believe slowness is inherently better. It's slower because some experiences simply refuse to appear at speed. Silence is one of them. Anticipation is another. Submission may be another. They cannot be hurried. They have their own pace. The only question is whether we're willing to accompany them. Some have inquired whether these recordings are attempting to produce altered states. I'm not convinced that's the most interesting question. I'm much more interested in the ordinary experience. The room, the floor, the breath, the pressure of clothing against the skin, the warmth that slowly gathers through stillness, the interval between one thought and the next. We aren't trying to create extraordinary states of mind. We're trying to look very carefully at ordinary ones. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes the familiar begins to feel quietly unfamiliar, not because reality has changed, because attention has remained beyond the point where it usually leaves. You don't have to agree with anything I've said. Agreement has never interested me very much. Curiosity has. If these recordings leave you feeling nothing, that's perfectly possible. If they leave you unexpectedly moved, that's equally possible. Broadcast Zero isn't interested in convincing you of anything, only in asking whether familiar experiences might possess qualities we rarely notice, simply because we don't remain with them for very long. If that question feels strangely compelling, then perhaps you've already understood exactly what Broadcast Zero is.